for what is the first of a series of history webinars that will be leading up to the 250th anniversary of American Liberty this coming July 4th, 2026. And, you know, for those of us of a certain age, we can remember the excitement and the buildup that attended our bicentennial back in 1976. And it's hard to believe another 50 years is almost up, but we're here now on the eve, as it were, of celebrating uh, a millennia of American liberty. And as part of that observation, the Ancient Order of Hibernians is going to be bringing you a series of history webinars that will address Irish contributions to the making and shaping of these United States. And as we get started on this endeavor, I can really think of no better subject than Commodore John Barry. And we have a sort of ambitious program tonight. So I want to introduce our very special guest who will tell us about Commodore Barry, and that is the author Tim McGrath. Tim has written some really tremendous works, certainly foremost among them John Barry, An American Hero in the Age of Sail, which came out in 2010. Just a remarkable, accessible, thorough treatment of the life of John Barry, and we're going to hear about some of that tonight. Tim is also the author of James Monroe, A Life, which came out in 2021. He's the author of Bring Me a Fast Ship, The Continental Navy and America's Revolution at Sea, which was the winner of the Samuel Eliot Morison Award for Naval Literature. And I believe Tim has Three Roads to Gettysburg coming out this fall and available for pre-order. So without further elaboration, I want to introduce to you and give the floor to Tim Barry to tell us about the life and times of Commodore John Barry. Tim, you're on mute. There we are.
Well, thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody. I want to be very grateful to the AOH and to Dan, Chris Cook for setting things up, Ray Lynch, and the inestimable Keith Carney, who I've gotten to know over the last 20 years, and also fond memories tonight of Jack O'Brien and John McInerney, who really with the AOH were the movers and shakers of so many things that's happened on Commodore Barry's behalf. Quick question to Dan. If I hit share, how do I get the PowerPoint up?
I think if you hit share, Tim, we're going to see your screen.
Okay, share is not turned on. Have you got it?
No, if we need to, Chris can bring it up.
Yeah, you should be able to share there, Dan.
Okay. If you can hit share, Tim.
Yep, if I hit share, and there it is. Now, how do I get it to move to the front? There we go. Whoop.
There we are.
There we are.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you, guys. All right, let the show begin. The first time I was called on to speak on behalf of an Irish-American naval hero was 50 years ago in the fall of 1960, actually 60 years, 5 years ago now. Our fourth grade teacher, Mother Mary Rachel, decided that there would be a presidential debate followed by an election. My friend Fred, who was not only the smartest kid in the room, but the smartest kid in the world, would stand in for Vice President Nixon. To my immense delight, I was selected to speak for Senator John F. Kennedy. My hairline was better then. With the untrammeled zeal of a 9-year-old, I plunged into my part. It wasn't enough to rehash the senator's phrase, "Let's get the country moving again." I needed to communicate fully about the recent recession, the missile gap with the Soviets, the importance of winning the space race, and the importance of the islands of Quemoy and Matsu. I was pumped, so pumped, in fact, that when a 6th-grade girl told me that Nixon wants to send American kids to school on Saturdays if he's elected, I dismissed it as hogwash and restudied Quemoy and Matsu. And by debate day, I was ready. But so was Fred, who I'm sure later taught Bill Gates everything he knows. The recession could only be worsened, he remarked, by the Democratic Party's love of something called deficit spending. There was no missile gap. The space race would be won by our German rocket scientists and not their Russian counterparts. And it was important to realize the implications of Quemoy and Matsu by their longitudes and latitudes and their proximity to mainland Red China. Fred knew their longitudes and latitudes. Before an audience of 30 Roman Catholic children, Fred's Nixon was thrashing Mike Kennedy. Finally, Mother Rachel gave each of us 30 seconds to sum up. Quoting Churchill, Fred reminded the class that a democracy like America's is poor government, but much better than a communist one. All I could reply to such wisdom was, if Mr. Nixon is elected, we will all go to schools on Saturdays. And when Mother Rachel asked where I obtained that information, I said from someone a lot older and smarter than myself, and Kennedy won in a walk. I promise that tonight's remarks are rooted in far more accurate documentation. If there's one place every visitor comes to in Philadelphia and makes a real point to see, it's Independence Hall, where they find a statue that simply reads Barry on the pedestal. He stands tall and fierce, as if on the quarterdeck of one of his frigates, the spyglass in his left hand above a sheathed sword, his right hand pointing toward an enemy ship in the distance, or simply following the southern path of the Delaware. Stand by that statue for just a minute or two and watch the tourists approach. Their cameras come out, the family poses, and invariably one of them asks, who was Barry? Who was Barry? And how did he get on that pedestal? To begin with, he was as physically imposing as any man of his day, 6 feet 4 inches, one of the few people in America who could gaze at his friend George Washington without having to look up at him. Years of trotting the deck gave him a sailor's grace. He never, ever lumbered until much older due to complications of the gout. He possessed the classic Irish head as we see here, large but with gray-brown eyes, nose, and mouth cramped in the center of the face with a strong jawline that ended in a rounded chin. By manhood, shaking hands with him must have been like sticking your hand in a first baseman's mitt. He was not handed a captaincy, ever, not in the merchant trade or the Continental or United States Navies. He rose from cabin boy to forecastle hand to mate. So the rough and tumble world of disciplining sailors and the intimidating language required were second nature to him. By 1779, he was so well known that when a fellow Continental captain sent a press gang across the Delaware to a brig under Barry's command, accompanied by several warning shots over the bow, all Barry had to do was seize his trumpet horn and identify himself, and the threat to his men ended. He was also smart, if not in an academic sense. He spent at least a couple of years in a County Wexford schoolhouse. 40 years later, when he received a letter from an old schoolmate, he went into an idyllic reminiscence. But having gone to sea at about the age of 10, the deck and crow's nest became his school desk, and the sun and stars became his blackboard. In a line of work that absolutely demands the constant paying of attention, he never ever stopped paying attention. Only once, and we'll get to that. Those who knew him well spoke of his strong and active mind. After his death, one of his sailors wrote that he knew how to perform all the duties of a seaman from stem to stern, and he never forgot them. And he never stopped learning. Prior to his one and only voyage to China, he sought out his friend and fellow captain Thomas Truxton, picking his brain thoroughly in order to know as best as he could what he was in for, from the perils of the voyage itself to the particulars of Chinese customs and customs houses. When the Grand Hoppo, the chief of customs, arrived aboard Barry's vessel and requested his sing-songs, the clever toys foreign governments presented him as gifts, Barry, unlike other American captains, came prepared and was rewarded accordingly with 2 bulls. It doesn't sound like much, but this reward for Barry's foresight was a godsend to his crew. After months of salt beef and pork, there was fresh beef for dinner that evening. He was ambitious, incredibly, unbelievably ambitious. He was born during the draconian reign of the penal laws that banned Irish Catholics from owning land, the right to vote, worshiping their faith, even speaking their own Gaelic language. On one Irish city gate was emblazoned the words, "Enter here, Turk, Jew, or atheist, any man except a papist." From France, Montesquieu condemned the measures as conceived by demons, written in blood, and registered in hell. Young Barry faced a grim future: to become a tenant farmer like his father, similar to being a sharecropper in the post-Civil War South, or join the growing ranks of young Irishmen serving foreign kings and regiments already known as the Wild Geese, fighting for every cause but their own. The only man in young John's life whose work allowed him to hold his head high was his uncle Nicholas, a ship's captain. For while Nicholas could never own the goods that were placed in his ship's hold, the penal laws forgot to ban the owning of ships to Catholics. Barry's first voyage was probably made under Nicholas's watchful eye. Just surviving the long, tedious, dangerous lot of a merchant sailor was and still is a feat in itself, but Nicholas's commanding presence was certainly important to his nephew. As captain, he was God on board, and the example he set for his nephew was as true as a compass. Was there ever harder work than being a sailor in the wooden world? Was there a career path or course more fraught with hazards? But for young John Barry, that was not just his way out, but also his way up. There existed another loophole that served as a perfect catalyst for young Barry's unbridled ambition, and that was the American colonies. They knew no penal laws. Religion and class persecution existed, but such hurdles were mere stones in the road compared to home. He came to America around 1760. By the time young John arrived, so many Irish immigrants had fled to Philadelphia that one official, calling them bold and indigent strangers, scornfully wrote, "It looks as if Ireland is to send all its inhabitants hither." In Philadelphia, success in the maritime trade made merchants and their captains rich. Barry's skills and Philadelphia's needs were a perfect marriage, and by 21, he was given his first command, a schooner and a crew of 5, making voyages to the West Indies under the ownership of a man whose ambition had also been rewarded. Edward Denny had been so successful at selling enslaved persons that he could buy his own ship and leave the slave trade. Years later, when he sold her out from under Barry's feet, the young captain enlisted a grocer and accountant as partners in his first experience as a ship owner, renaming her the Industry to demonstrate his determination for its success. His aspirations were also recognized on dry land when he was made a member of the prestigious Society for the Relief of Poor, Aged, and Infirm Masters of Ships and their Widows and Children, better known as the Sea Captains Club. The roster of captains and owners was a veritable who's who of the Philadelphia Maritime, and their dinners at the city tavern gave Barry the chance to observe proper behavior in the dining room. While some members of the club were from as rough and tumble a background as he, there were others like Charles and Nicholas Biddle, raised in a far more genteel environment, equally at home in a merchantman's decker salon, with quiet intensity, shown in this picture believed to be a young John Barry. He listened to how they spoke, saw what they wore, scrutinized their posture, and watched what fork went with what course. For him, the Sea Captains Club was a stepping stone to Philadelphia's upper class. He never stopped trying to educate himself, but maintained his frugality. Writing years later to his brother-in-law, then in England, he asked for the latest books, including Tom Jones, while insisting they be given to the ship's captain so that Barry would not have to pay any custom duties. And his limited education guaranteed that he became one of America's foremost phonetic spellers, and also proved to posterity that he never quite lost his Irish brogue. When he described that a tactic in a desperate battle required a great deal of art, he spelled it a great deal of art. Say the phrase aloud, and his accent becomes yours. He may not have been a born leader, but he mastered the art of leadership, honing his skills during his ascension in the merchant trade, until rewarded with the command of the prize ship of the colonies, Robert Morris's Black Prince, in which Barry sailed the fastest, known 24-hour day in the 18th century, 237 miles. It doesn't sound like much now, does it? But there were days when he entered distances as small as 30 miles during the voyage. So when a gale presented perfect conditions, Barry put his sailors to work like a pit crew from the Indianapolis 500. When the gale carried away the main topgallant royal yard, the highest sail aboard ship, Barry jury-rigged its replacement. The very act of sending the Black Prince hurtling over the waves gave him joy, and his mood was contagious. His leadership in the American Revolution was noted by both sides in the war. He took chances, but not foolish ones. Given command of the brigantine Lexington, seen here defeating the ship Edward, the first victory for the Continental Navy at sea, he used his knowledge of the Delaware Bay to even his chances in a cat-and-mouse game he played with much larger British ships, turning into the wind and coming to a standstill while the larger cruisers approached, then changing course for the overfalls, the treacherous shoals that still encircle Cape May. He particularly vexed Captain Andrew Snape Hayman, a successful captain and commander later knighted and promoted to admiral, who later served on the court-martial of the HMS Bounty's mutineers. Writing in 1776 to Lord Dunmore in Virginia, Hayman sounds like Captain Ahab talking about the white whale. Without a small vessel that can go in shallow water, it is totally impossible that I shall be able to do anything with this brig Lexington. All the north side of the Delaware Bay is encompassed with shoals and shallow water, and this passage Mr. Barry is at present master of. I have chased him several times, but can never draw him into the sea. Hayman closed, stating that Barry's successes had made him bold. Barry made Hayman's life miserable over the next 3 years. His own officers and crew liked and respected him. Years after he died, one officer wrote how the innocent mirth of the seaman was his delight, and good humor would extend to permit himself to be the subject of joke and mirth. When anyone had neglected or done anything wrong, and when asked by Captain Barry how he came to neglect it, the person would begin to state he thought so-and-so. Captain Barry would hastily say, "Who gave you the right to think?" which occasioned the crew to address their comrades, "Who gave you the right to think? Don't you know that Captain Barry thinks for us all?" On one occasion, he overheard the line and let a pregnant pause serve to send the speaker into quiet fear before breaking into laughter himself. American sailors followed his orders willingly. The promptitude of his decisions on sudden emergencies was lauded at and admired, one officer recalled. On one occasion, he was roused from sleep on a moonless night in the North Atlantic to find his frigate, the Alliance, surrounded on 3 sides by a flotilla of icebergs. One of his passengers, Thomas Paine, wrote vividly of the fear all felt at the sight. Reading his letter, one can almost hear Celine Dion singing in the background. Barry's calm demeanor and clear orders were all the crew could look to for reassurance. After several hours of sailing alongside the bergs without fatal damage, the last mountain of ice floated past them, and a relieved Paine said the passage would not be easily worn from our memories. Barry was not always blessed with the best of crews. On several occasions, he was so short-handed that he took on foreign sailors, not just French hands, but British as well. Commanding the Raleigh in 1778, he was forced to take British infantrymen captured at the Battle of Saratoga to serve as his Marines. On the voyage that Tom Paine wrote about, a significant portion of his crew were captured British sailors. Given a mission to take Lafayette to France, Barry's muster rolls included several dozen Frenchmen who spoke no English but were, to Barry's chagrin, far better hands than their American counterparts. Nor was it enough to face mountainous ice and British cannon and musket fire. He faced down 3 mutinies, quelling them with 3 very different solutions. Perhaps, though, his leadership is best seen at the end of his career. He held the first commission in the United States Navy, but by 1797, at age 52, he was older than his years and no longer the hero of the hour, despite popular songs that called him just that. But during the quasi-war with France, while other captains received accolades from President Adams, Barry served as Mr. Chips to the next generation of naval heroes, including Stephen Decatur, Richard Somers, and Charles Stewart, the grandfather of Charles Stewart Parnell. Barry was also judicious. In 1780, he was sent to Boston with 2 assignments: assume command of the frigate Alliance, the finest American ship of the war, and responsibility for the court-martial of her captain, the Frenchman Pierre Landais, whose crew had seized command of the ship en route to Boston. Landais is as colorful as they come during the Revolution. He is a deadly duelist whose command style is both insulting and inept. It's as if the deadly Marquis in the novel Scaramouche had been cloned with Inspector Clouseau. Landais is best known for firing into both the Bonhomme Richard and Serapis in John Paul Jones's battle off Flamborough Head. Congress had given Barry a diplomatic nightmare to resolve: a mutiny of American sailors against a French captain aboard an American ship whose name honored French intervention. Barry's solution required navigational skills one did not learn with the sextant. He approached post-war politics the same way he learned to sail, following the example of a role model, in this case, his friend George Washington. Like the president, Barry had decidedly Federalist tendencies, but just as Jefferson's Republicans were much so too sympathetic for the French for his taste, the Hamiltonian Federalists were too close to British interest, something Barry's Irishness would never be at home with. So he charted a neutral course, counting Republicans like Benjamin West, seen here on the left, and Federalists like Robert Morris on the right among his good friends. Ironically, during the Quasi-War, his Federalist bosses, President John Adams and Secretary of Navy Benjamin Stoddert, were openly contemptuous of Barry, while the anti-Navy Republicans under Jefferson were much more admiring of his talents. The glue that held his wits, ambition, judgment, and leadership together was his courage, as seen on May 29, 1781, when the Alliance battled 2 British ships of war off Nova Scotia. No sooner did the engagement begin when the wind died. The enemy's ships, having sweeps, rode into position on either side of Alliance's stern, allowing them to pound Barry's frigate while his gun crews were unable to return fire effectively. The battle lasted for 3 hours, by which time the smoke must have hung over the 3 ships as if they were Macbeth's witches, and the motionless Atlantic, their cauldron. As with the icebergs, Barry's commanding presence on the quarterdeck served as a rallying point for his men until grape shot struck him down. Adventurer and realist, and both traits are found in one humorous incident. By the end of the war, Barry was so broke that he asked Anthony Wayne, his colleague in a cattle rustling venture during the Valley Forge winter, to lend him $200 to pay his crew. Wayne didn't have the money either. A planned voyage carrying tobacco to Holland for Robert Morris went so terribly awry that Barry lost the chance to command the first American ship bound for China. But in 1787, he was given such an opportunity, overseeing construction of his new merchantman, while the Constitutional Convention took place just blocks away. Barry saw both the convention and the voyage as a joint opportunity, a stronger central government's treasury could finally assure that Barry and other naval officers would at long last be paid, while a successful China voyage could bring him unthought of wealth. When the convention ended and the Pennsylvania Assembly began debating the document's approval, it fell to Barry to provide the solution for passage. When the backwoods representatives, anti-federalists to a man, did not show up for a scheduled session, they deprived the pro-federalist colleagues of the necessary quorum to vote for passage of the new Constitution. The next day, Barry led a crowd of sailors, stevedores, and wharf toughs down Chestnut Street to the boarding house where the anti-federalist ringleader, think Daniel Boone meets Newt Gingrich, and one of the other absentee assemblymen were packing their things. Some say Barry found one of them hiding in the outhouse. Like a scene from an old John Ford movie, Barry's raucous escort service down Chestnut Street provided a unique solution, literally throwing them into the chamber, and approval was passed. He was not perfect by any means. He made mistakes, including a big one. Having earlier defeated the ruthless Captain Sir James Wallace on the Delaware, torturing two of the ships from Wallace's convoy and scuttling another, Barry sailed the frigate Raleigh out of Boston Harbor, where he was pounced on by two ships under Wallace's command. After a long northward chase, Barry believed he lost Wallace in the same manner in which he eluded other British pursuers. But Wallace was not so gullible, and further, he knew that his opponent was the same captain that beat him months before. Barry no sooner headed south when Wallace's ships appeared on the horizon. In a long-running battle up the coast of Maine, Barry lost his frigate, escaping with only 1/3 of his crew. The ensuing court of inquiry absolved him of any wrongdoing, but is considered by some naval historians to be a whitewash. His temper also got him into trouble, never more so than with his Navy Board boss in 1777, Francis Hopkinson. The little attorney, well over 4 feet, as my Irish grandfather would say, was a brilliant maritime lawyer, but fawning to his superiors while condescending to those captains beneath him. When Barry was given orders from Hopkinson to sink his frigate, the Effingham, near Bordentown as a solution to keep it out of British hands, orders which originated from Washington himself, Barry was furious, and when Hopkinson personally decided to supervise her sinking, the petulant captain stepped aside. What followed next was a scene from a colonial Caddyshack, and Barry's subsequent angry outburst nearly cost him his captain's commission. His relationship with Benjamin Franklin was strained at best. During the war, other captains arrived at French ports, immediately took a coach to Paris, and fell under Franklin's spell. Barry never did. In countless letters, Franklin commiserated with Barry over his lack of sailors, money, or both, while whimsically countermanding Barry's orders. Judging from Barry's tone and stiff penmanship, he must have been holding his quill as stiff as a mast. He chafed under Franklin's Cheshire cat-like dismissal of both his orders from Congress and his needs in port, while Franklin, with feigned resignation, told Robert Morris he considered Barry a great man influenced by small matters. And Franklin never forgot Barry's perceived disobedience to his changing of orders. Years later, after Barry's aforementioned Shanghai service to the Pennsylvania Assembly, Franklin got in the last word in their relationship by ordering Barry's arrest. Barry's sense of humor is evident in his writings. He can laugh at himself with ease while kidding with others. But if there's any failure in his public life, it's in China, where he was given other people's money and other people's lists, requesting satins, dishware, teas, and furniture. From reading his explanations of what he bought, as opposed to what these people asked for, and despite all of his maritime and military skills, John Barry may be the worst shopper in the 18th century. His rise in public life and the success that went with it allowed him to improve his living conditions, culminating in purchase of a country estate called Strawberry Hill in what is now the Frankfurt section of Philadelphia. In his later years, he lived well and ate well, as the portrait by Gilbert Stuart shows us. Ironically, this refugee of the penal laws became a slave owner as early as his 20s. One purchased before a cruise against the British petitioned Pennsylvania officials on his return, hoping the shares he believed he risked his life for in battle would be enough to buy him his freedom. Countless other enslaved men saw duty at sea during the Revolution. All of them, including this man, saw their wages and prize shares go to their masters. There were two women in his life. His first wife, Mary Cleary, sadly died young while Barry was at sea, and we know next to nothing about her. His second wife, the remarkable Sarah Austin, came from a well-to-do Philadelphia family that was torn apart by the Revolution. One brother, Isaac, went with Barry to fight at Trenton and Princeton, while the eldest, William, remained loyal to the crown. But even William's activities in service of his king, which threatened the family's financial survival, did not keep Barry from remaining his friend, even interceding to Washington on his behalf to gain his release from a prison ship. Later, Barry always addressed his letters to the exiled William in England, "My dear brother," even while Sarah and Isaac would have nothing to do with him. But Sarah Barry loved her husband as unconditionally as he loved her. Their letters, though few compared to John and Abigail Adams, are full of affection. She always addressed him as "my dear life," even while some passages are an 18th century version of "you never write, you never call." They also show that she possessed an innate wisdom, not only keeping him up to date on family and city happenings, but remaining philosophical about the trials and tribulations he shared with her. Always, he hoped he had surmounted all obstacles while wishing for a few months of your society to make me happy, signing off in one letter late in their marriage that it was composed by candlelight, but without spectacles. Despite two marriages, he never had children. Instead, he raised two orphan nephews as his own sons. There was a constant stream of letters from his relatives in County Wexford, all in need of financial assistance that he never failed to provide. In 1785, he heard from his uncle Nicholas, informing him that his parents' gravesite had no headstone. "It grieves and troubles me much, your being so worthy a son, that there is no memorial of them in the churchyard of Rosslare," Nicholas wrote. There soon was. Later in his life, Barry received a plea from his cousin Nancy Kelly, whose husband was killed at Wexford in the 1798 rebellion. While he was alive, Barry's father always gave her half a guinea from the money that Barry sent him. Now a widow and destitute, could he provide her the same? Of course he could, and of course he did. Young Irish immigrants were told to look him up upon arriving in Philadelphia. Without exception, he did what he could to find them employment and housing. When a young Irish lass arrived as servant indenture to a rich Philadelphia wastrel of such low character that she wanted to run away, the pompous young man sent her to Barry's doorstep. Such was his reputation in Philadelphia as a soft touch to anyone from Ireland. That said, he was first and foremost an American. When an old acquaintance from Wexford wrote him about buying land in the Mohawk Valley, Barry all but ordered him to Philadelphia. I am much at a loss to whether you have a family or not, and what your views can be for a man of your advanced years to bury yourself in the woods, unacquainted, I presume, with cutting down trees or building long houses, far removed from any place to educate your children if you have any. If you can make convenient to spend a few weeks with me at Strawberry Hill, within 3 miles of Philadelphia, you cannot refuse my request, as you would have a great deal of time on your hands this winter. Typically, he best summed up his love of city and country in one sentence. When another Irish friend looked to return to the old sod after a lifetime in the West Indies, Barry was genuinely perplexed. After all, he believed, there is everything the heart could ask for here. When he died in 1803, years after battling asthma. The nation's papers carried the momentous news of his passing. A century later, thousands attended the dedication of the statue that stands behind Independence Hall. In the decades since, more statues, monuments, and a handsome bridge have been named in his honor. His cutlass, hung in the Oval Office during the Kennedy administration, where it bore silent witness as the president navigated his way through the most perilous 13 days of the Cold War, using the Navy in the judicious manner that Washington and Barry first envisioned in 1794. But still, he was being forgotten. But that looks to be changing, thanks to the diligence of the AOH. There's a gate named in Barry's honor at the United States Naval Academy, Annapolis, with a memorial placed alongside. And there's a renewed interest in his life and times on both sides of the Atlantic. Discovering his full story and the chance to tell it has been a privilege for me. But I want to leave you with another name, Shubal Gardner. No novelist could make that name up. And when I saw it, I was immediately interested in finding out what happened to him. In the Alliance's last engagement with the British, fought off Cape Canaveral, weeks after the Treaty of Paris had officially ended the war, Shubal Gardner, master's mate, was mortally wounded and died 2 days later. He was buried at sea. I never could find out if he had any descendants. But soon the answer hit me. Of course he has. He has the same descendants as John Barry. They sail destroyers in the Persian Gulf. They fuel planes in Turkey. They go without our knowledge into the most dangerous places on earth for months at a time. They transcend geography, social status, political party, gender, race, and religion. If John Barry's legacy is his example of leadership to today's armed forces, Shubal Gardner's is found in their overwhelming devotion to duty. Indeed, Shubal Gardner and John Barry have quite a family tree. Thank you very much.
Well, Tim, thank you for that really fantastic presentation. And I took your book down from the shelf to prepare for today, and it struck me in the early chapters that you mentioned the penal laws more than once, a series of legislative enactments that created legal disabilities for Roman Catholics in Ireland at the time. And it struck me that Captain John Barry of Philadelphia of 1775 is a Horatio Alger story in and of itself. If there never was, Revolutionary War, this is a remarkable story of a young cabin boy getting to that situation in life, and then what happens from there is even more extraordinary.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it, Dan. When I found his family papers, 23 years ago at the Seaport Museum in Philadelphia, I was floored and kept coming back to see it. And I had reached out to a history professor I loved studying under at Temple, Jim Hilty, with the idea of saying to him, if you've got a grad student who's looking for a topic for his thesis, you can't make this guy's story up. It's the Captain Hornblower books my dad had in the attic I read as a kid, or the Patrick O'Brien novels that became so popular in the last century and still through today. He's just, a really, really larger than life figure, and the fact that he could still have, totally the common touch and be so much this one sailor who's became an officer for him, John Kessler's memoirs about Barry were just wonderful to read.
And you sort of anticipated my next question, which was, I wonder if you could share with us a little bit of the process of writing the book back when you did this and some of the source materials that you've just alluded to.
Well, if the truth be told, it was since with Jim Hilty kind of gently bullying me. There's a library named after my dad at the University of Pennsylvania Veterinary School. In fact, he took me when I was 4 to Independence Hall and to see the statue of Barry, and Barry's pointing like this. And I asked him, what's he pointing to? And you would think I thought he would say, the enemy ships ahead, or the Delaware that runs down to North Wildwood where we go for vacation. But being a pathologist, he said he's pointing and saying, I'm buried over there. And he then took me over to St. Mary's. But Jim really pushed me hard to say, you could do this. And when you were an underclassman, you just didn't apply yourself. So hence getting involved with it. But the research was a lot of fun. And so many people at the Naval Historical Center, at the Library of Congress, Michael Crawford and Gordon Parsons, folks at the Navy Center, and Bruce Kirby there, and Ted Riley up at the New York Historical Society with a huge volume of things. And the research is really the most fun. I think if I was going to say one of the one things I enjoyed very much was finding a letter from Sarah Barry during the Quasi-War to a manure salesman. And she's up alone with a couple of servants at Strawberry Hill. And she writes this letter saying, we made a deal with you that you would get 3 wagon loads of hay and we would get 3 wagon loads of manure. You have picked up the hay, but we have yet to see our 3 wagons. I would hate to think that you're taking advantage of a woman whose husband's at sea serving our country in this difficult time. And I thought, gee, I wonder where I'm going to, what happened next. And in the Barnes collection up at New York Historical Society, here's a receipt signed by her, received such and such a date, 3 wagons of manure. But Sarah's remarkable. She marries him. She's a good bit younger. But when they get married in 77, 77, what the ultimate day of the year of the hangman, after the defeats of Brandywine and her brother William's going off to be in charge by the Howe brothers to make sure that the Patriots don't burn the city down. And she's caring for her half-sister's 7 children and a newborn, and the half-sister died in childbirth. So she's in Reading at their summer home when Barry loses his ship with Hopkinson and stops at home on his way to Valley Forge to say to General Washington, I want to keep fighting. And I just wondered if he came in and said, you won't believe what happened to me the last couple of weeks. And I would imagine the look she gave him was like, oh yeah, you want to go one-on-one on this, Jack? But their correspondence, while not frequent, is nearly as strong as you'd love it to have, is really good. And his reports are phenomenal. They're really, he's very thorough. He writes another piece at the Seaport Museum that is pretty much a guide for the next captains that come to China. This is what you have to do. This is where you have to go. And then the other thing that's so interesting is his nephew Patrick Barry comes along, and he's 17 years old, and he writes a journal that is phenomenal. And he talks about crossing the Atlantic. They hear a pistol shot one night, and the third mate has shot himself. He describes bats with 7-foot wingspans and snakes of various 7 feet long, red and yellow. And then while he's in Macau, I guess he had a chance to meet with ladies of the evening, because the last bit of it is he writes, Madam full of shame, and that's it. So there's plenty of good reading there.
You mentioned the conflict with Hopkinson, the sort of shrewd maritime lawyer. We get the sense that maybe Barry had personal courage and knew how to do his job, but maybe was not as politically smooth or as self-promoting as others, particularly in the early days of the war, perhaps.
That's a good question and a good point. He is well regarded by Congress. Robert Morris gave him the finest command before the war. And but he doesn't suffer fools. And I think he saw Hopkinson as one, that here's this brilliant maritime lawyer, and when they talk about sinking the ship, the thing is you put her in the middle of the Delaware, and then you hammer out the plugs by the keelson, and the ship will sink. And Hopkinson knew all about maritime law, but he never must have looked at a tide table that day because he had the plugs ordered out while the tide was going out and not coming in. So it's tending to flip. And it was something that perturbed him. And his relationship with Franklin too was, no disrespect to Franklin. He was, but he got a little annoyed with, the fact that Barry's like, can you just give me what I need so I can get back to, going after the enemy? So he does have that bit of just let me do my job and we'll be fine. And another point, based on what you said, he does not toot his own horn. He doesn't know John Paul Jones well. In their line of work, the captains aren't going to know each other all that well. But they had a couple of meetings that were really good. One up in Boston while Barry was recovering from his wound. And Jones thought the world of Barry and Barry the same. But John Paul Jones was his own press agent. His reports of his battles are full of, it was happened to this, and then I did this, and then I did that. He wrote his own poetry. He meets Phyllis Wheatley, the now famous young Black poetess from Boston during the Revolution. And oh, she's writing poems, then I'll write a poem to her. You wouldn't picture Barry doing that.
So you mentioned that the AOH, our organization, and Irish America have taken some pains to promote Barry and to secure his place. And we have with us tonight on the call Keith Carney, who's a longtime active Hibernian with our Commodore John Barry division in D.C. Keith's a past national director, past national editor of the Hibernian Digest. And Keith, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about, maybe give us some of the background that Tim mentioned about the Barry Gate at Annapolis, and then talk about the exciting events that are coming up shortly on the battleship New Jersey.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you to the AOH for putting this on. Very timely for events coming up for the 250th anniversary of both the Navy, which is a week from Friday, and then the 250th anniversary of the United States. So great timing, and look forward to a lot of the projects that we can work on together. I had been involved with with our friend Jack O'Brien on building the Barry Gate and the monument and the plaza at Annapolis. We spent many years going back and forth with the Admiralty boards at Annapolis, trying to get, and it started out with we wanted a simple plaque outside the Commandant's house, and there was a lot of anti-Catholic, anti-Irish prejudice that was throughout the meetings, and no one really wanted to recognize Barry. And it was letter after letter. We were trying to get support from members of Congress, and all of the members of the AOH did a great job in helping with that. And obviously, we were trying to raise money during that time period. And one day, Jack O'Brien went for a meeting with the museum director at the academy, and he's walking down the hallway, and he looks up on the wall, and in a broken frame, glass was detached from the frame, and Jack looked up, and behind that frame was John Barry's commission, the original parchment, and it was fading away in the sun to history. And he pointed it out to the head of the museum. He said, "Do you know what that is?" And the man said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, let me tell you what it is." He said, "That's the original parchment orders for John Barry, commission number 1, and it's signed by George Washington as president and James McHenry, the Secretary of War." Well, this so embarrassed the Naval Academy that at the next meeting, we got more than a plaque. They offered us Barry Gate, the memorial, and an entire plaza. We took the original parchment, we brought it to a curator, a professional restorer here in Washington, and we got it. We paid for an estimate. I think we paid $500 for her to open it up, and we got to see a beautiful piece of history on John Barry in person. And she gave the estimate of $25,000 to get it restored. Well, we offered that to the Naval Academy, and the answer was absolutely not. The Navy will pay. So that one incident of Jack O'Brien walking by this broken frame with a piece of history that was about to could have been thrown away for all we knew, that saved the original commission, and also gave us the foot in the door to build that monument. And it's beautiful. If you've never been down there, you should go see it.
And do we actually have any photos that we can share of that today? I don't know.
I do not. Does someone have?
There
Chris,
we are.
do you have
Thank
that?
you. Thank you, Chris.
So one of the things that Brother Jack did insist on all of the monuments that he had built, including this one, and this video shows it's not really to the public viewing, but those monuments he always requested that on the back of them they have the Ancient Order of Hibernians written there.
Yep.
So there you go. And anyone that goes to Annapolis will go through the Barry Gate and see that, thanks to Jack's work and Keith and the other Hibernians who were involved in that effort.
And that Barry's Gate is the People's Gate. So there's a number of gates that you can come in through. You can drive through several of the gates, but the Barry's Gate is the one that you walk through from the town.
Yep.
So Keith, coming up now, the event that's going to be coming up, share that with us if you would, please.
Yeah, well, Jack and I got, we had a request there's a new Navy museum that's being built in Washington, D.C. It's a $500 million project that they've done land swaps. They'll be right down by the old Navy Yard where it is, and Nationals Park, just off of Capitol Hill. The museum wanted Jack and I to develop a display for Commodore Barry. They wanted his own suite in the early Navy time period. So we had a number of meetings. We went up to Philadelphia as well and met at the Navy of the American Revolution. Did I say that right, Tim? Is that the right?
Museum of the American Revolution, yeah.
Museum. Okay. And we had a number of meetings. They wanted quite a heavy donation to make this happen. And Jack was aghast at the price, which I won't go into, but they promised us we could have our own suite for Barry. Some things have contracted a little bit with that museum, and with the new administration coming in, there's questions on some of the funding. But subsequently, in August, I got a call from the folks involved in the Navy Museum, and they said, "Hey, the 250th anniversary of the Navy is coming up in October. Can you put a museum display together and put it on the battleship New Jersey for that event?" And foolishly, I said, "Sure." And we we embarked on the battleship New Jersey's anchored in Camden, right across the river from Philadelphia. Beautiful view of the skyline. And so we were tasked with building a memorial or a museum display. So we enlisted Tim. I think I was much like Barry at the Constitutional Convention and grabbed him by the neck and said, "Come on, you're coming with me." But he's done so willingly, and Ralph Day and Kevin Dillon and others have pitched in tremendously, and we put together a very nice historical display. We've got a number of artifacts, not many on the artifact side because it's a small space. They couldn't fit a 700 or 350 pound bronze statue that we were going to bring up from the Navy Heritage and History branch, but it's not a conditioned space, so there was limits as to what we could actually put in there. We were also on a very tight fuse because they came to us in August and we had to sign a contract in the beginning of September, and we have to load in. Ralph and I will be up on the ship on Friday, loading in the display with the curator of the museum and memorial. So interestingly, and I've got just a couple of slides that I'll show you, but let me go to that first. Wrong slide, but I can start here.
Yeah.
I was talking that we wanted to have a reception and make it an Irish night on board the ship. There's they have tents up, and we were going to so we're having a reception on October 3rd, which I'll talk about. So I asked the CEO of the ship. I said, so it's an Irish event. You've got a big white tent, beautiful view. Do you have a lighting contractor that I can utilize? And we'll put some green light on the, shine it on the tent to make it a little more dramatic. And he said, well, Keith, I'll do you one better. And he pulled up this video. So I'll play this. Hopefully you can hear it. They're going to light the entire ship green.
Yeah, I don't think we have the video coming across. I'll share that for you, Keith.
So that So that is our venue. And that venue is will be lit up in green. And I'm going to change my battery here. 1 second. Hopefully I won't lose you. The ship is really a terrific venue. And as you can see, it's just overwhelming. But we'll have on that night, and I'll go back to sharing my screen. We'll start with the slideshow, perhaps. There we go. Okay, and I'll bring that up. Can I bring that up? There we go.
Got it. You got it.
Okay, good. So we are part of the Navy's 250th anniversary, and they're having more events the week after, and we'll have our reception. They'll have a number of events starting on the 9th, going through the 13th, and we'll have our event on the 3rd. So we'll be the true kickoff for the 250th anniversary of the Navy. And how great is that to have Commodore John Barry, Commission #1 in the Navy, have the first event? So we'll be celebrating. And this is an AOH and LAOH event. It's not a Keith Carney event. It's not the Commodore John Barry Division is spearheading it here from Washington. But we've been very involved with Pennsylvania State Board, the National Ladies and Men's State Boards, the New Jersey State Board, Philadelphia County Board, and a number of the Irish organizations in Philadelphia. The reception is going to be, we're going to have a cocktail hour with some traditional Irish music from 6 to 8 p.m. on board the ship. There'll be a piper greeting people as they come on board. You'll be able to go onto the ship and see the display, as well as watching folks who are going to be our guests. We'll have the CEO of the ship, Rear Admiral Samuel Cox, who's the director of the Navy Heritage and History Command. The Lord Mayor of Wexford is coming into town with his some of his associates. So he may even offer to put his gold chain on anyone who would like to adorn that. And then we'll have the ambassador from Ireland, Geraldine Byrne-Nason, is going to be coming up from Washington to sort of be our keynote speaker. And she'll be, we're going to ask her to fire off a 5-inch gun at Philadelphia. We've promised no live rounds for that firing, but it'll be a fun night. We're also going to have the head of Homecoming 250, who is doing, he's organized all of the Navy and Marine Corps events in Philadelphia the following week. George Leone will be coming, and he'll be there. And then the new Consul General from Ireland in New York, Gerald Angley, will be coming as well. And he'll probably have some of his staff. And if you're not familiar, that down to New Jersey and Philadelphia are part of his dominion and his territory. So, excuse me, we'll be looking forward to seeing him. So we have a number of displays. Tim helped us with writing the historic and the presentation. This was an early draft, but I just wanted to show you it's an actual, it's a wall that will be set up in the location. The panels will be a little larger than what they are depicted here. We're going to have some uniforms there, some artifacts, a lot of photographs, and we'll have a multimedia display, and bringing through AI, we'll be bringing Commodore John Barry to life. So we'll be doing an interview with Commodore Barry that will be on the screen. It's going to run about probably 7 to 10 minutes. It's a small area of display. We hope people can as they come through, will have enough time to watch it, but you'll get some interesting points from the Commodore himself. And then we'll be playing some other historic videos, Kennedy and Reagan talking about Barry. But there's expected to be over 200,000 people coming through in the next couple of weeks into Philadelphia. And the ship will be a big, one of the big locations that people will be coming to. So this gives great exposure. You know, we spent years trying to educate not only the public, but the Navy about the importance of Commodore John Barry. So this is our chance to do that. And if anyone wants to attend, there's still tickets available. There is a price for that. It's only $75, but it's a good deal. It's an open bar for 2 hours, great heavy hors d'oeuvres, desserts, and great crack with all of your fellow Hibernians. My email is down at the bottom. If you would like to come, drop me an email and we'll send you the information. And then the big thing that we're trying to work with at this point. This is all being funded. It's a pretty pricey ticket to put the display up. We're working with, we have to pay the ship for the display, and we're obviously paying for the reception. We're taking care of all those costs, and we're trying to raise money with donations. We've had a lot of generous people step up, and we can leave this up for a minute. You can make general donations. If you're looking for a tax deduction, we have the Commodore Berry Division Charitable Fund, which is a 501c3 that any donations over $250 can will send the receipt back for tax deductibility. And it's a good cause, obviously, to to help educate people about John Berry. One of the things that I'll say is we've built the display in a modular manner. And we did that specifically because we're not sure how long it will be on the ship, but we want to be able to pass it on for the AOH to use as part of the Irish America 250 and the efforts that that the National Board is doing and what other divisions. And we can make additional copies of the entire display. Some of the artifacts we won't be able to copy that are original pieces, but most of this we will be able to, including the interview, and we can share those so that people all around the country who are organizing displays on Irish America can utilize some or all of what we're doing. So there's no and I follow in the stead of Jack O'Brien. And the only thing you'll see is when you come into the display is that it was built by the AOH and the LAOH, and that's it. We're not in it for any recognition other than to have the man recognized and to have the organization recognized. So we hope that you'll support us. We hope that you'll come. We hope that you'll look into getting some or all of it for displays in the upcoming year for the American 250th. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And Dan, thank you so much, and Chris, and I think Liam's on there somewhere. I hope I didn't circumvent your discussion.
No, so Keith, that sounds great, and thank you for sharing that with us. So October 3rd, it's a Friday night, is the big reception that you've described, and there are tickets, as you say, available for that. And then people who can't make that Friday night, then October, is it 9th through 13th, they can go through the ship and see the AOH display as part of the other.
The display will be up for that ceremony or that celebration during that week, but it will also be up through the end of the year. So it will be on the ship, and we're in negotiations about keeping it up through the end of the 250th through the end of next year. So it's going to be a great display, and we're making so many great contacts. Villanova's Irish Studies program will be coming over. They'll be sending some representatives, and they want to learn more about the AOH and what we have to offer in our archive and our history. So they'll be there, and there'll be a lot of good folks from throughout Philadelphia and the Irish community there. So,
and Tim, I understand you'll be with us on October 3rd. Is that right?
I think I'm there for a couple hours in the afternoon. Wouldn't miss it.
And maybe you'll have copies of John Berry, an American hero in the age of sail, with you, I hope.
I think they were trying to get some orders, if they could get things ordered. I don't know if they got it through, but
he'll also be on the 11th. There will be a book signing ceremony on board the ship on the afternoon of the 11th. And Tim, I'll get you the timing on that.
Okay, sure. And then I think you've got me 12 to 2 on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Is that what you were looking at?
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you, gentlemen. As I said at the outset, we're on the eve of America 250. We're looking to commemorate and recognize the role of Irish men and women in the making and shaping of our great nation. And I can't think of a better way to have started than to have you two gentlemen on tonight to talk about Commodore John Barry, the father of the U.S. Navy. So thank you. And Tim, I'll leave you with any closing remarks you might have about Commodore Barry for us.
closing remarks I would have about Commodore Barry is the more you learn about him, the more he's admired. Uh, uh, just a person that's, a classic Irish, still waters run deep. And I would say the same thing with today, getting to know you, Dan, and Chris Cook's help and Ray's. And then Keith and I are significantly older than when we first met. But man, I'll tell you, uh, Jack O'Brien, he still makes me smile just thinking about him. And how are you going to fill shoes like that? And the answer is Keith Carney.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, great. And great to remember Jack here as we close out the program. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing some of you on October 3rd. And that concludes our presentation tonight.
All right, guys.